This machine is kind of the first step of the operation. We bring in range brass from ranges or police departments or anything like that. And you go through and sort the brass. This one sorts by diameter. So it's basically just two rolling bars spinning against each other with a little bit of using gravity, and allows the bars just slowly get wider and wider and wider apart. And you know, kind of the first steps, sorting out the 22s. Next would be your 380 and 223s, so on and so on, down all the way to your larger calibers like your magnums. So after the roll sorter, what we just barely showed, this one sorts by length, and so it's actually going through and sorting by the height of the case rather than the diameter. So like on 9mm, same diameter calibers, you got 9mm 38 Super Comp. Sometimes 223 is close enough to be the same size. Sometimes someone actually shot a 380 out of a 9mm chamber, and you've got a 380 that's now the same diameter as a 9mm. This machine's going to make sure we're not dealing with any of that stuff, and it's going to get rid of it. So it'll go through by height all the way down here. Cases get loaded into the bull copper feeder, which is actuated by this, slowly brought into the bowl. As it makes its way up, it'll get kicked off from up here. We've got 357 Magnums and your 44s and whatnot on the 38 Special, 10mm, and so on and so forth, all the way down to 380. So this is how our brass is washed. Basically just using vibratory tumbling, using water and different soap assortments, I guess. Everything is washed before it goes into processing, and after processing before it gets loaded, which gives us the shiny effect and makes it to where it cycles better in your gun as well. So what we have here is just corncob media. We basically essentially take it, and you can do a couple different things with it. We use it for before our washing. So everything gets run before our corncob, before it goes into its initial washing. Keeps the water cleaner, cuts down our our time on washing, kind of cuts into some of that dirt and grime a little bit. And on top of that, you can also do it on loaded ammunition. That's what it's doing right now. If the finished product isn't good enough, this stuff right here is a pulled, it's not remanufactured brass, it's pulled brass, meaning that it came from a factory, the projectile has been pulled off of it, the brass has been salvaged as long as the primer, but the brass kind of has a little bit of a tarnished look to it. We'll go ahead and load it, and then afterwards go through and tumble it, giving you that better shiny look. So this machine is an example of our case processing, how we go through and basically bring that case back to SAAMI specifications and ready to be loaded and primed. This machine right here is pretty damn unique. It's got a case feeder on both sides, as well as all your die set right here and your die set over here, and they're perfectly identical. So everything it's doing on this side of the shell plate is doing the exact same thing on that side of the shell plate. All of our cases, everything that leaves the shop, we open the mouth, make sure that mouth is open. You've got a debris check right here, check the inside of the case. You got a crack check, making sure that there's no existing cracks on the case right now. You're going to go through and decap, remove the old primer that's already been shot. We're going to size and swage. And the last station is just to make sure that the primer was kicked out of the casing and ready for a new primer. So this machine is just a standard Dillon 1050, which most of you know. This one has an auto drive on it with just a train drive. All this machine ever does is just it cuts 556 cases into blackout, and so or 300 blackout. So basically we're making this case right here look like this case right here. Inside here there's a spindle in there with the boring bar. It's going to just cut down the casing and all the excess brass, all with a sizer die inside there. So this machine is set up for 223 Remington right now, and what it does is all it does is prime the cases. 9mm we prime up to 14,000 an hour. 223 we run right around 9,000 an hour. This machine has the capability to actually checks, make sure that the case is there for one. Next station it's going through and it's actually checking to make sure there's not a primer still in the primer pocket, or a primer that's been kind of mangled inside the primer pocket. So we can check for that and it'll stop the machine, and you can go ahead and fix the issue and start the machine again. After that, it's going to go through and it's going to feed the primer onto the feed ramp. And you can see right underneath here, it'll feed to where the primer is just sitting underneath the case. And as it'll come up to this wheel, it'll slowly get inserted into the primer pocket. The last thing it has is it actually checks to make sure the primer was actually inserted in the primer pocket. And it'll stop the machine if it's not. Okay, this machine is loading 223 Remington. This one was set up for 55 grain FMJ. We run this one at 75 parts per minute. This machine, just like our processors, we go through and we make sure, we're going to recheck to make sure the crack never happened in the loading process. So it's going to check it for a crack. It's going to check the inside of the case again. It's going to dump the powder. The thing that's unique about this machine is it's got laser powder checks. So it's actually checking the inside of the case for the powder, but it's not using a rod. So you're making sure that you're not knocking any casings out of or any powder out of the casing. Then it's going to seat the bullet. It's got a laser overall length check, and then it's going to crimp it as well. Also, the other thing that's unique about this is it's actually going to automatically reject the cases that had a fault on it, never stopping the machine. So this machine is an ammo load, loading 9mm. Right now it's set up for 115 grain 9mm. Same thing, it's going to have the debris check. It's going to go through, it's going to drop powder, it's going to have the powder check on it. The difference about this machine between the 223 loader is this one uses an actual rod powder check. So you're actually sticking a rod down in, touching the top level of powder, making sure that level comes to the right height, and make sure the powder is correct. With that, it's always got a little bit of loss, but in a manufacturing setting you have to have a powder check. As most of you know, the laser powder check is definitely a huge upgrade in technology for these things. So this is our packaging machine. Everything just basically gets loaded into the hopper, comes down the ramp, gets loaded into trays like this. From here, well, this machine only does 9mm. From here we can actually go straight into a flip tray, so we can get a full inspection of this, and then straight into a chamber block as well, just to make sure that everything's going to chamber. This machine only does 9mm, but from here, retail stores and ranges, we put them out in this in 50 count and 100 count packs. So every other caliber other than 9mm, which this one actually just happens to be 9mm, is just hand inspected. So everything's hand filled into a chamber block. All the primer seating depth is checked, checked to make sure it chambers, and checked to make sure the projectile orientation overall length is correct on the bottom end.